Good afternoon. This is Jonathan Alexander, Live Golden News, reporting here in Lake Havasu, Arizona. And this is the Constitutional Week. We are ready.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go ahead and get started.
Will you please stand for the invocation and the national anthem, and then let us pray. Our Father, we gather tonight to enjoy the freedoms that have been delivered to us by men and women who fought hard for the liberties which we now enjoy. We ask you to bless those great fighters and patriots who went before us and those who are fighting today, who have paid so dearly to deliver to us the sacred blessings of liberty. May we never forget their endeavors. We humbly implore you, Lord, to guide our nation in the upcoming contests that will decide who will pilot the great ship that is our nation. We ask that you guide our hearts and minds in this great event. Save our nation from the evils that seek its destruction. We pray for your guidance in this preservation of this great nation. From our hearts, we ask this, O Lord, in your own name, the author of liberty. Amen.
Oh, sing, and see, to be light. For so proudly we have, and twilight whose broad side and bright through a veil of rain we walk was no and rock with breath of see through the night. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic of the nation,
God.
indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Thank you. May you be seated. Well, Lake Havasu Patriots, welcome to the Friday edition of the second annual Lake Havasu City U.S. Constitution Week. While we're with the military veterans line standing up to recognize those. Thank you for your service. So we're, as you know, this does cost some money to do this. So if you can do donations, even if you put in $1 or $2, that really helps in our jars out there. So we would be grateful. We are going to be closing the silent auction tonight. So if you happen to be a winner of one of those, you can probably pick it up tonight. I just wanted to let you know that. Also wanted to thank our sponsors who are so important, and also our silent auction contributors. Without them and donations and yourselves, none of this would be possible. We hope this event grows. I think Lynn, we got a little bit of work to do with a city of 60,000 people. We've got to work cut out, but hopefully every single one of you can help us grow. This event will grow if you want it to. It's up to us. At this time, I'd also like to thank our decorating committee. That would be Lisa, Linda, Lynn, Karen, Marta, and Mary. So let's give them a hand. We also have Ted and Steve in the booth who have been very vigilant at making this happening. So tomorrow's speaker is Arizona Director of the CSPOA, Randy Miller. Please, if you can remember to bring a chair, it's going to be under the bridge at the stage. And if you can wear patriotic clothes, a patriotic attitude, and a flag. If you have a flag, if you don't mind sitting in the back, but the more the merrier. Let's make sure we celebrate, let's get loud, and let's make some noise tomorrow. All right?
What time?
One thing that we're going to be doing after Randy gets done speaking, we're going to try to pull off a press conference with the America Happens Network. Is Corinne here? No? No? Okay. That network is based out of Washington, D.C., and also what we're going to have is Lisa Bolden with the Patriot Free Press will also be here. We asked, she's bringing another journalist, and she's going to be asking what we all learned from Lake Havasu City U.S. Constitution Week this year. So we're going to get some media coverage, and we're I don't know where this press conference is going to go, but we're going to get some of the players that contributed to Constitution Week and see where that takes us. This will be a first time attempt. But what the heck, let's give it a shot. So at this time, I would like to introduce Karen Vanderjet, who is with the Havasu Patriots. I think it's important that we understand what this organization is. They have made a difference, and I think we don't know what they have done. So I'm hoping Karen can help us out a little bit with that. Karen Vanderjet.
Stand up if you have been to a Havasu Patriot meeting or you're receiving the email. I just want to see how many are here tonight. Just kind of look around and see
It's
who
been
they
a
are.
while, but fine.
So anyway, we've got Mayor Fred Stone around the city, and let me tell you how we got started. It was actually a bunch of us were concerned about what was going on in the city in 2020, and we kind of went to the city council, and people were going up talking about the masking and the control and everything that's going on, and we kind of walked outside, kind of exchanged phone numbers, and a couple of the guys, I think Steve Tuminello and Greg Buffer, Bedford, and yeah, a bunch of those guys. Yeah. They got together and kind of started meeting. We met at Steve's place.
Yeah, sure did.
You say you're not involved, Steve?
Well, I haven't been involved in a little while. Still, yeah. On the
Steve
board,
has,
there.
use his coffee patio to get started. Lots of meetings there before it got too hot. And so that's kind of how we all got started. And we use the power of people, and we would do all kinds of different things. Let me tell you some of our accomplishments. I don't think how we did it, but some of our, and I need some help here. But the removal of the mask mandate, the emergency, is it? Steve, was it the emergency proclamation? Is that what it was? We had moved.
Yep.
Am I saying that right?
I believe you are.
And the big one was the hospital requirements of vaccines. They said it's never such, if you don't have your vaccine, well, it wasn't just the hospital, it was anybody who was medical. And we ended up having about 300 people down there in 2 days' notice because we had a list, because we had a way to contact people. And we were all over advertising. In 2 days, we had 300 people there, and they said, I got a phone call from a city council member who was on the board of the hospital, and she said, Karen, they're afraid of you. And I said, oh, they're afraid of me. They said, you're afraid of me. You're afraid of people. And she said, well, we're going to make a deal. We're working this out. And so, like a day later, they came out with something, and they sent it to all the people at the hospital. We got this note saying, just sign this paper and you are exempt. And, they just, they didn't want to let go of their employees, so they saw a way out. We did it. So it was pressure. And we really got hard on the drag show with the children. Yeah, right, you're a big part of that. Yeah. And we would meet once a week, and we'd have a prayer march. And we would write letters and speak at the city council, and we did all kinds of things. And I think the killer one was when I was on the show, and a little crazy. But you know what? After that, suddenly we we then had it so that only Lake Havasu was over 21, and every place else it was still child. So it happened. No, that we did put it in a police report. I don't know what made it happen, but it did happen, and I think it had to do with the pressure that we gave it. So, Steve Tuminello, did I miss anything as far as the things we've accomplished? Yeah, I mentioned that already. Yeah, I mentioned that. I think you were texting, so I think you. Yeah. So anyway, that we had some major successes, but with a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. So let me tell you how we did it. We were appearing at the board of supervisors meetings, the city council meetings. We had prayer walks, we had petitions, we had podcast appearances. We had letters to officials, meetings with the mayor and the police chief. We had rallies, we had radio appearances, and I don't know, am I leaving anything out?
Peaceful protest.
Peaceful protest.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is how we did it. But we've been doing this for 3 years, and we're just people that won't give up. So right now, what we're doing is that if you want to be a part, we have up to like 700, but we have a bulk mail system. It's very expensive, and they said if you can get it under 500, then the cost will way down. So we look and go, okay, these people are not opening their email, they're gone. So, if you want to be on our email, you will be gone if you don't open email. So just let you know. So tonight, Cindy back there, remember, and I should let you know, this is bothering some people, and if it bothers you, we are very low profile. We collect money in cash. We don't have any.
We're stealth.
No, we're stealth, yeah. We're stealth and proud of it. We are not gonna put the name out there. If you give us our email, it's not going anywhere. And we're only gonna send you an email if you, are going to get some information about something we're going to do, some action plan, or you'll get an email, because we have a special speaker, like Jonathan Alexander came and took out, we said, okay, we gotta have a special meeting for that. Dave is, one of our leaders, what do you wanna say, Dave?
I had tentatively scheduled October 17th
Okay,
from 11:30 to 1:30 in the afternoon for this meeting. And we also have Mike Yanushkin will come.
oh, okay. So what did you do?
So the meeting.
All right, he's saying, that we're tentatively planning a meeting for October 17th. They're always at the library. Usually they're 12 to 2, but he's saying it's gonna be more like 11:30 to,
We're barely fitting in.
okay, they're barely fitting us in, so 11:30 to, 1:30. So Mike Show will be our guest speaker, so that's a reason to have a meeting, because we're having, a guest speaker. So that will be the next meeting. We don't have meetings just to have meetings. We have a meeting for a purpose, so say, well, if there's going to be something we need to do, then we're going to do it. So I just want you to know we're very careful with your email, and Cindy, raise your hand. If you want to be on our email list, then all you do is you just text in your email. That's it. Then you're a member. That's it. So anyway, that's it, I guess. Okay.
With what you just said, I think I've got a rather echo. A perfect scripture that I wanted to share with you, James 4:17. And it goes like this: so whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, for him it is sin.
Amen.
At this time, I would like to introduce our local favorite for this evening. Steve Makowski is a military veteran who gained his interest in political science as he worked for several political influence groups, which led to his curiosity about our Constitution and its history. All the studies have been personal. As a professional photographer, he provided service for many at the Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs, Colorado, mainly USA Basketball. He was awarded the Star Crest Solo number 1299. He published his first book, The Real Constitution. It's right here, but I think he's already done a second edition. Would you please welcome Steve Makowski? Wait a minute, I got a question. What is the Star Crest Solo? Can you explain what that is?
Skydiving. It's when you enter a formation 8th or later. You've got to be good to be able to do that. And I just had to put that down there because the number is really low. I was old school skydiving with the round parachutes, and now and the small jump planes, and now everything's big, and the numbers are like 50,000, and my number's still 4 digits. I'm pretty happy about it. Okay. All right.
One last question. How many times have you jumped?
Close to 500. I was an instructor at Jump Institute. It's fun. It's fun. We have a person. This is where it happened. This is Independence Hall, I took this when visiting up there. That seat right there is where George Washington sat. And I asked the guard, is that the same chair? And he goes, yes, it is guarded. And on that chair, you can't see it, but there's a sun that's either rising or setting, you can't tell. And Benjamin Franklin, at the end of the convention, said, it's rising sun, it's rising on this nation. But this is where it all happened. But what has happened here? We know that government is off course just a little. Politicians are getting incredibly wealthy. Bureaucrats are getting very wealthy. The DC Center is a source of incredible income for people, even restaurants and all that stuff. And that's why when President Trump said we ought to move the Department of the Interior into the interior, there was a major uproar, to break apart the DC power structure they didn't want. But they're quite powerful too. We've been having talks about this all this week. I won't labor the point. We've got to get government back on course. Now, how do we do that? Appeals to the politicians won't work. They're in it. There's very few that really want to get out of it. We have to change the Democrat support. And there's a way we can do this because it's being hidden from them. And we start with the debt that they're loading on the future. Nobody wants it. And that's where we start. Now, preparation on this is important. Focus is important because the media redirects. I used to do card matching. Redirection is the one thing you work for. But anyway, it's funny, this place here, in 1963, my dad was stationed in Philadelphia, 1 block away from this room here. And it was at the customs house. And my brothers and I, we used to go sometimes to my dad's work, and the elevators in the customs house dropped really fast. We used to jump to try to hit the ceiling. For that business, but now it's all locked in, and there's guards everywhere. We were just walking in and taking a look at it. They put security everywhere. I don't think that's fun. But anyway, it's all secure. Washington's chair. Now, when I started writing, this is my 3rd book. This is 2nd revision. By the way, Steve Tumminello, I want somebody to hand out all these books so you're all holding one because I'm going to refer to them. Okay, so make sure everybody's holding one, okay? I work on downstream history. I can only look at what was originally written, hoping it's still the same. And many people modify history as it goes down the line. I researched every quote back to its source. And I talked with the man in charge of the Jefferson Papers at the University of Virginia. I've really worked at this. All the quotes in my book are authentic. And I know some people aren't investigating that. Some are quite well known. But anyway, let me see here. So in other words, we're not going to change politics until we change some of the opposition. At the beginning of the book, I start working at the foundations. What this does is it starts with the foundation. If you look at page 5, there's a quote there. Setting the foundation. And this is by James Madison. If men were angels, no government would be necessary. The problem is, people are inherently evil and greedy. And if you give them the opportunity to take money, they will. If angels were to govern men, neither external nor internal controls on government would be necessary. In framing a government which is to be administered by men or men, the great difficulty lies in that you must first enable the government to control the governed, and next place, change, oblige it to control itself. Control itself. That has been totally lost. Next slide, please. Okay, this was a portrait at the signing of the Constitution. I mean, it's got Hamilton, Ben Franklin, Washington. I don't know who all the others are, there's 55 of them. But up here, you have Plato. Plato wrote the first real book on government called The Republic. And in The Republic, he admitted that you have to separate the politicians from gaining financial advantage over the people. And he had a system called guardians, where guardians, they could not own property, they were to just make decisions. Aristotle, the other guy in this here, wrote Nicomachean Ethics. His son was Nicomachus. And he wrote about what is ethics. Really? He was asking, what is justice? Then Aristotle's, what is ethics? And, you know, it's interesting because in the book, The Republic, he wrote about Socrates arguing against a guy named Thrasymachus. And Thrasymachus said that injustice is more powerful and stronger than justice. In other words, you cheat people. Justice is in the interest of the stronger. It's going on today, isn't it? It doesn't matter what's right. Might is what does it. Because we're going through right now what is called lawfare. And I think we ought to call it media fair too, because they are not. They're waging war. By the way, how many are familiar with Niccolo Machiavelli, who wrote The Prince? That is how to run a government, yeah. He said that the most important talent of any leader is to wage war. That's the most important thing. So, in a way, ethics takes a backseat. Right now, lawfare and tabloid politics is what we're going through. Now, next slide, please. Is this working okay for you? When I was reading around history at that time, I couldn't get over, first of all, how mad they got about tea. Okay, why? And then as I read more and more and more, I realized how many people were sick or died because of tainted water. And I thought, how do you make tea? You boil water. This is before Van Leeuwenhoek's studies on microbiology came out. They didn't realize that boiling water was getting rid of all the bugs. Maybe that's why. It's just something I put together when I'm reading all this. But the Tea Party showed how angry people would get. But they moved from there to the Declaration of Independence when the politicians, the leaders, pledged the sacred honor. Who has sacred nowadays in our politics? You know, I think you can count them on one hand, but it's kind of leveraged. But anyway, after the war, the Articles of Confederation popped up. It was a loose agreement between the 13 colonies. Now, they realized that you had to keep the U.S. intact. They had a common enemy with the British. Once that common enemy is vanquished, what can happen? So they made a loose association with the Articles of Confederation. A few things were wrong with the Articles of Confederation. Next slide, please. Just a few things. They were arguing over waterways, over who had the right way on this. There was no money. They were bartering. Some states were making up their own money. There were actually gangs of looters and kidnappers and everything going from state to state because there was no cross-border law enforcement. I mean, it's stuff out of a Clint Eastwood movie. It was bad. Let me see here. Washington said Congress was on crutches, no power to enforce the law. Well, you don't have law enforcement. You don't have a country. I'm not talking about today. John Adams said the difference between the states was worse than the nations of Europe. How many wars have come out of Europe? Think about that. That's why the founding fathers knew that no matter what, they had to keep the Union together. I don't know if you know this, but talk about slavery a little bit. The original Declaration of Independence had clauses in it opposing slavery, but the committee took it out because they said the southern states would never sign for it. Okay, we're here. Okay, we're no ability to collect taxes. No defense. And this is interesting. Spain was controlling the Mississippi River, had shut it down to American shipping. There were British forts in the continental U.S. The U.S. was a joke to them. And these are all reasons why we had to get rid of the Articles of Confederation. And I read things that we did. Some authors, current authors, are claiming that we didn't give them a chance. Oh, yeah. Now, this is interesting. Some of them wanted to divide the nation into four areas: East, Middle, South, and Trans-Allegheny. I'm going to get back to this in a second. But they were kind of making a loose association between these four states, or four sections. I'll get back to that. And then we had Shays' Rebellion. And that really woke up Washington and all the states except Rhode Island. When the Constitution started in May of 1787, all the states sent representatives except Rhode Island. But I think they only needed 12 people for hands across America. Anyway, okay, I covered Shays' Rebellion. Okay, next slide, please. This is a map I pulled out of I found an old history book from 1860, and it had color plates in it. I thought that was so cool. But this is the way the colonies were made then. But they also, we talk about the separation of those factions. They didn't want states fighting each other. They wanted the strong federal government that would prevent states from fighting each other. So what they did is they created a government that was limited, but it's kind of passed now. Next slide, please. This, I've read a lot of quotes, but this one I thought was the best. The men who drew up the Constitution of Philadelphia during the summer of 1787 had a vivid Calvinistic sense of human evil and damnation, and believed with Hobbes that men are selfish. You know that he's got Calvin and Hobbes. Okay. They were men of affairs, merchants, lawyers, planner businesses, speculators, investors. They had seen human nature on display in the marketplace, the courtroom, the legislative chamber, and in every secret path and alleyway where wealth and power are courted. They felt they knew it in all its frailty. To them, a human being was an atom of self-interest. They did not believe in man, but they did believe in the power of a good political constitution to guide him. I thought that was an exceptional quote. And you stop and think about it. These guys, they sweltered in a closed chamber in the summer in Philadelphia, wearing clothes like these, which are not cool, and they created a constitution. You just cannot say enough for what they did there. Next slide, please. So we get to a question here. By the way, when I'm arguing about a constitution with one of them, I do not mention religion at all, because they go, oh, there's a separation of church and state. I talk about morality. What is honesty? Honor your commitments and oaths. How many congressmen honor their oath of office? Respect for property and life. Interesting, isn't that? I have dug through records here, and it goes down to a couple of basic things: honesty and respect. And they're turning this upside down. By the way, I worked with a publisher for a while, and they established too many rules with me, and that's why I went self-published this book. One of the things that surprised me, they said, if you use any biblical passages at all, it has to be from this source, because other writers of the Bible have copyrighted their sections. Wait a minute, what? Isn't that surprising? They said lawsuits have resulted from you copying something from a certain Bible and putting it in there without proper information. I have a question for you. Next slide, please. Do I have the Ten Commandments on one of those slides? I don't? Okay, I moved up. While on morality, I wanted to ask something here. I moved up, I'm sorry. You have the Ten Commandments. And usually people break one commandment before they break any other. One specific commandment leads you to break all the others. Does anybody know what that one is? No? The 10th commandment, thou shalt not covet. Because you covet before you steal, lie, cheat, murder, everything. Coveting. Now, guess who's pushing the coveting button with today's people? Oh, the rich, they don't pay their fair share, etc. Coveting is it's the doormat for the breaking of the other commandments. That's in the book too. It was provided to me by an old Jewish gentleman who, rest his soul, was one of the most fun people to talk to. He always had some good points. But, okay, types of government. What makes us a republic? I'll get back to that in a second. Democracy, okay, we go back to the book. In the back, way in the back, I have Federalist number 10. Now, in it, it's almost the last 10 pages. In it, Madison writes, hence it is such that democracies have ever been spectacles of turbulence and contention, have ever been found incompatible with personal security or the rights of property, and in general been as short in their lives as they have been violent in their deaths. Theoretic politicians who have patronized this species of government have erroneously supposed that by reducing mankind to perfect equality in their political rights, they would at the same time be perfectly equalized and assimilated in their possessions, their opinions, and their passions. Democracies are dangerous. And we're being told we're a democracy. No way. We're a republic. Fascism, there are a million opinions of it, but what fascism was, Germany, they allowed the businesses to stay private, but the governments got. You get to socialism, the governments own the businesses, and communism. Little variations in the two there. We can argue about that forever, but that's basically different. Because right now we're headed to fascism, where the government controls all the businesses. Give me a second here. I put my notes on top of my notes. Okay, so what is morality? Come to that. Types of government. See, I can't use my computer here, so you can kind of lost it. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, Independence Hall, where they met. They debated, they produced a constitution. I'm not going to go through all that stuff, but I'm going to go through some of the characters in it. Next slide, please. Anybody know who this is? Just at the top of your head. His peg leg may give him away. Okay, that's Gouverneur Morris. He wrote the greatest sentence in the history of mankind. He wrote the preamble to our Constitution. We, the people of the United States. This is the guy that wrote it.
Governor Morris.
Gouverneur Morris. His mother's last name was Gouverneur. And so he took her last name as his first name. It was pretty common in those days to do that. Now, I read a lot of stories. First of all, this guy was smart. He took the Constitution down from like 17 articles down to 7. I mean, he really roomed it out. And even James Madison, it's covered in there in the book. James Madison said nobody could have done a better job. It was exceptional. But the funny thing about this, I told you I do a lot of reading. Somebody said, no, he didn't break it in a carriage accident. He broke it jumping from the second floor window to escape a jealous husband. And he was a ladies' man. What do you believe? You know, it's just one of those changes here. But Morris, gifted scholar, enrolled at King's College, now Columbia University of New York City, at age 12. Some of these guys, well, see, they didn't have video. They didn't have entertainment. To them, in the long winters, they studied. What else are you going to do? As Jefferson said, if you don't spend the winter preparing for the next spring, you will eat oatmeal for a year. They really had to work even during the winter months. He was aristocratic to the core. He believed you need an aristocracy to rule. So did Hamilton. Because if you let the people take over government, they would take over everything they could. Ben Franklin, let's go to the next one. I have this in the book at the beginning of the Constitution chapter. And he agrees with it. But the second section there, this is likely to be well administered for a course of years and can only end in despotism as other forms have done before it, when the people shall become so corrupted as to need despotic government, being incapable of any other. Boom. By the way, when he attended the Constitutional Convention, he could hardly walk. He was taking, what do they call those, sedan chairs? And they had 8 prisoners carry him to Independence Hall every day. It was action here. Next slide, please. This guy, I used to photograph for the Claremont Institute, and some of you may know them. They're like Heritage Foundation West Coast. Really, some extremely smart people. John Eastman is with them too. That's where I met John first. But this guy is James Wilson. And every one of those attorneys and historians thought this is one of the greatest men and one of the greatest legal minds in the creation of the Constitution. A guy you never heard of. I mean, I never heard of it until these guys started talking about it. He signed the Declaration of Independence. The United States Constitution has served as a Supreme Court justice after the Washington took control of things. By the way, let me give you here. When Washington took control of the government, it was amazing. First of all, he was sick, but he had to set every office from nothing. Can you imagine all the people that went to New York to try to get a job? You know, it was truly an act of God how he got everything to work. Not enough said about Washington's first term, thank you. But anyway, I've left that for a bit, but it's, as he says here, my goals are certain that it's the best form of government which has ever been offered to the world. And you know, I agree with him, but it has to be managed properly. That's the problem. He's in there too. Next slide, please. So what makes us a republic? This is a common question. Nobody has answers for it. But first of all, it's a moral government. You throw morality out, you throw honesty out, you throw the purpose of all the bureaus, you throw out law enforcement. Separation of powers. Right now, they're being bridged. When the House orders the president to appear in front of them to testify, no, separation of powers. Constitutional amendment process takes a lot more than a majority to pass a constitutional amendment. 3/4 are required for a constitutional amendment, which still amazes me how the 17th Amendment got through. Just never. Pardon me? Electoral college. Basically, that through the decision-making process from the popular vote to the states. Very, very important to stop the spread of democracy. Limitations on government, the 10th Amendment explains it. It's not the Constitution, it's up to the states or the people. That's why abortion was sent to the states. Perfectly legal, and look at all the argumentation. Perfectly constitutional. Post office, of course, foreign trade and treaties are responsibility of the federal government alone. State-appointed senators, now we're getting back to the 17th Amendment. Before the 17th Amendment, the state legislatures determined who their senators were. And they usually appointed their best people. So in that way, the states had some say in the operations of the federal government, could check its growth. When the 17th Amendment was ratified in 1913, the states lost all their influence in the legislative affairs of the federal government. Next slide, please. How many of you like Patrick Henry? Because if you're going to raise your hand, I'm going to change your mind. This guy, when the Constitutional Convention was going on, he said, I smell a rat. And he lobbied everyone to stop this. He argued. He was one of the anti-federalists, but a very strong one. Remember I told you about those 4 sections they were trying to split the nation up into? He was part of that movement. And some speculation, again, I read a lot of things and I'm getting some things. They said he wanted to be part of the southern section to rule over slavery. But after it was ratified, he went, oh, it's the most wonderful thing you've ever seen. Politician, just going where the wind takes him. You know, I used to really respect the guy until I studied a lot of him. He was East, Middle, South, Trans-Allegheny. Thomas Jefferson was writing to, when Thomas Jefferson was the ambassador to France, he was writing to James Madison. And then Jefferson had invented these little code devices to where they could codify their messages to each other, so somebody was reading the letter, because you never know who read your letters. But Madison was complaining about Patrick Henry. He's stopping our moves for a new constitution in Virginia. And Jefferson responded that the only thing we can do is to pray for an early death. And I thought, Yeah, they didn't like him. It's fascinating. Okay, next one. Okay. The Federalist Papers, when the Constitution was given to the states, am I doing okay? When the Constitution was written and given to the states kind of, what? All sorts of anti-constitutional articles started popping up. And Hamilton, Madison, and Jay wrote 85 essays. Why the Constitution was good, the benefits, the safety it gave the states. And I've read all of them. They're exceptional, incredible writing. Earlier, I read a little bit of Federalist 10. Federalist 10 is in the back of my book for a reason. It is so important to understand that. I cannot emphasize it. But they, in Federalist 84, they argued that a Bill of Rights is a bad thing because it will give people a foundation to claim rights not granted. He was right in that respect. But the anti-federalists, the guys that didn't want it, actually guided it into having a Bill of Rights, which I thought was necessary because it only grants a couple of rights, but the rest are limitations on the government. And the 10th Amendment being the most important. But anyway, that's in the book too. There's one other thing I want to cover here, and it's in the book, one big chapter. Some people say, well, give the Constitution how it happens to people so they understand it. I don't agree, because they read it, it does have a context to it. I tell them to read Washington's Farewell Address. There's a whole chapter in there on Washington's Farewell Address. And basically, Washington's Farewell Address is, don't do this. You know, and he told us not to do. But he gives a good story of why we shouldn't. And especially political parties. Washington hated political parties. Okay, next slide, please. Once the Constitution was ratified, it went, big celebrations. There was a celebration in New York, but in Philadelphia, they had a big one. Now, in the parade, they didn't have celebrities. They had butchers, bakers, maids. All the people that made the city work were in the parade, which is very different from what we have nowadays. They actually created a wagon that, this is an artist's picture, but from what I read, it to support the ship, they had laid tarps in it with tar and put water in it too. And now you know where the term parade float came from. You know, but this parade in Philadelphia was big. They were really celebrating it. Butchers, bakers, farmers, coopers. How many of you know what a cooper is? Barrel makers. Now you stop and think how hard it is to make a barrel, you know, in those old days. Let's see here, all sorts of journeymen. Ship chandlers. They used to provide goods to ships in the harbor. Okay, next slide. Wait a minute. I've got to tell you what I'm doing here. Next slide, please. How many of you know land surveying? This is how surveys are set up. All the land in Nevada is measured from an initial point of Mount Diablo in California, just east of San Francisco. All these, every land measurement in Southern California is Mount San Bernardino. The initial point in Arizona is by the Speedway, Goodyear. But they work from an initial point. Next slide, please. And the sign for an initial point is this. What I did is I talked about the Constitution is the foundation of all laws, should be the foundation of all political measurements. Get rid of this right wing versus left wing. It's a manipulation of our dialogue. It's the Constitution or you're left. Aristotle's rule of non-contradiction, either you're a constitutionalist or you're not. There or left. And I created this little emblem here for the initial point with the star representing state powers like it does in the flag, and we the people indicating the Constitution. That's what I call the constitutional initial. So when we argue, never accept the term you're right. No, I'm a centrist. Either you're a constitutionalist or you're not. So I hope I've given you good information here. By the way, those books, if you want to take them, I just asked for a donation. They're for $11 on Amazon plus shipping and tax. But here, just take care of me and put it back there. But anyway, are there any questions? Whoa. Yes, go back there. Right.
Microphone.
Okay, all right. Surprise.
Do you have plans for another book anytime soon?
Repeat the question.
Do I have plans for another book anytime soon? I'm toying with an idea about my skydiving days because I jumped in Casa Grande, Arizona, which was an outlaw drop zone. We bounced 4 guys in 6 months. And we were bombing things with watermelons and stuff like that. I figured that'd be some good stories. But I don't have plans for another book. People ask me to write a book for school children. And the more after I saw an interview with, who was Trump's Secretary of State, the guy from the Army Academy? Who? Pompeo, yeah. He said the most dangerous person in the world right now is the head of the teachers union. I just read that this morning. Whoa. Yeah, okay. Go ahead. Any other questions? I almost tased you.
When you were researching this, did it take you in a different direction than you thought it would at any point?
You know, I think what got me was that I realized how many people are in the market just to sell books. That surprised me because I've read some books and what the heck did they write this for? And, you know, like Levin wrote his book on the state article of the Convention of States. Why did he do that? That's the worst thing that can happen in today's political. But he sold books. And what got me is how few people are focused on making things better. They just, that's what got me. When I developed this constitutional initial plan, I thought, if we do not change the dialogue, we're not going to win this. They changed the dialogue, and in the book I put, they bridged the separation of powers with the way they're doing things, because people think they're the centrist. They're not the centrist. Okay. All right. Any other questions?
While you're thinking about asking the question, through the last year, occasionally I've been talking to Steve, chit chat, not that often, maybe once every 3 months. And he'd always try to run things by me, but you know, he's on a different level than I am. But Steve always wanted to get it right. He was always changing, re-editing. I mean, like, he has scrutinized his work a lot. And just in 2 years, I think you really have grown. You're very good.
Thank you.
So, next question.
Over here.
So I've read Mark Levin's book about Article 5 convention, and I wonder if you could say a few words about the dangers of that for those who may not have read his book, because in his book, he leads us in a particular way, and he's ignoring human nature and the things we talked about initially. I wonder if we could say a few words about the danger of that.
You know, it's one of the big dangers of the Article 5 Convention is the Constitution. The convention was set up to amend the Articles of Confederation. And what they did is they know we're going to write a new constitution. And New York had 3 delegates, Hamilton, Yates, and Lansing. And 2 of them left when they realized they were writing a new constitution, which left Hamilton alone, so they didn't have a delegation. Hamilton never cast a vote in it and wasn't there all the time. But I don't know where Hamilton was born. Okay. Go. No, it's Nevis. He was born on the tropical island of Nevis, and bastard child. And his grandmother from Scotland has the same last name as my grandmother from Scotland. And I thought maybe one of these days I'll investigate that. But go ahead. Yes.
Do you consider the bridging to include the judicial branch?
In what respect are you talking about? By having partisan justices who don't agree with the Constitution? Yes. We go back to the 17th Amendment. The justices have to be approved by the Senate. And when the Senate is politicized by a party, they can get anybody in there they want. And they can ignore the Constitution. Because the abortion decision was classic. It's 10th Amendment. It's black and white. And these people still voted the other direction. Anybody else? Yeah.
My friend just told me this evening that the Supreme Court voted against the First Amendment when it comes to social media, and that the government can control and censor, and they don't care about the First Amendment. Is that true?
I didn't hear all your questions.
The Supreme Court voted against the Constitution, against the First Amendment, freedom of speech. And they said that if they don't care about the First Amendment, they will continue to censor Facebook, social media for the protection of the American people. So that means that if we're trying to share things as patriots, they're going to censor it. They have been censoring it. And the Supreme Court, so they don't care about the First Amendment.
Okay, I got you now. You know what's interesting here is they're getting on this area, this gray area of a private company. What can a private company do? When does it turn into a public utility? And I'd have to read about that. I have not read about that. But what I've learned otherwise, other than what you just brought up here, is you cannot determine what a private company does. You know, as far as constitutional rights go and stuff like that, we each can have our own area, you know. But I wish, you know, the internet is changing everything. They're going to have to start making some decisions based on the change in technology in the town square. Because basically I look at it as a town hall where people aren't being allowed to talk, even though it's owned, the town hall is owned by people. That's the way I look at it. Technology is really testing a lot of our rights. One of the things that got me, by the way, George Washington's farewell address, in it, I'm shifting a little bit here. In it, he said that we should not have big foreign policy. But in those days, if they knew that eventually Iran could shoot a missile and in 70 minutes it destroy an entire city, he would have thought that technology is changing some things, and this SCOTUS is going to have to address it. You know, that's a good point. Anybody else? Okay.
Now you're.
Yeah, I know.
People don't understand that there's no such thing as separation of church and state. I'd like to explain to everybody the truth about that.
Right? Can I? Okay. Yeah, the separation of church and state was in a letter of Thomas Jefferson that he wrote to the Danbury Baptist, about the Danbury Baptist. And Jefferson was not a writer of the Constitution. He was in France at the time it was written. But the faction that talks about the separation of church and state uses that. And when you explain the reality of it, all of a sudden, go, wait a minute. And this is why I keep arguing morality rather than religion. It's shortcuts. Because, let me see here, they really pushed that. And what year was it that he wrote that? Was it 1789? 1804? Okay.
I wasn't there.
Yeah, it's before my days. Okay. Anybody else? Anybody else? Okay. All right, thank you. I hope you enjoyed this. Okay.
Just a couple of things that I want to point out. I've been talking to a few of the other people that have been helping organize this. And just keep your ears open that we might do something on December 15th. The significance of December 15th is, I guess you could call it Bill of Rights Day. So we're thinking of maybe doing a one-day something. We don't know what the something is, right? But we'll let you know if we do that. We're thinking another significant day is March 4th. So it's the first day we actually enacted the new Constitution. So just something we're thinking about. If it's been, we need all of you to bring more people, but that's what we're thinking about. I think that's it for tonight. Any questions? Anything? Okay.
Sunday night, this Sunday night, 6 o'clock in Wheeler Park, we are celebrating mothers who have lost their child on the field of battle. That Sunday night. Gold Star, can you, where's Wheeler Park? In Wheeler Park, this Sunday night at 6 o'clock, we are celebrating mothers who lost their child on the field of battle.
Thank you, sir. All right, I think that's it for tonight. Thank you for coming. By the way, remember tomorrow at 9 a.m. under the bridge, we're going to get started, which is our final day. Bring a chair. Thank you. Bring a chair. Please come.
Here's my hat.
Good night, everybody.
All right, guys, just want to thank you for joining our broadcast. And we'll be back live tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. So hope you'll join us then.